In October of 2023, a Chilean TikTok influencer known as the Narco Queen was gunned down in broad daylight. At the time of her killing, which was captured on video by a bystander, Sabrina Duran Montero was out on parole. She and two of her brothers had been arrested for supplying, distributing, and trafficking cannabis, cocaine, MDMA, and other substances earlier in 2023. 24-year-old Montero, a local drug trafficker, had amassed a following of more than 600,000 TikTok users, garnering a reputation as a narco influencer. On the day of her death, Montero was on her way to a nail salon in the Santiago town of Padre Hurtado, where she was approached by three men. In the eyewitness's cell phone footage, a masked gunman was shown approaching the young woman, who was already lying face down on the ground as the recording began. The assailant fired multiple rounds at Montero before absconding in her vehicle with his accomplices. Local law enforcement theorized that the broad daylight execution stemmed from some sort of conflict between rival gangs. As of the latest developments, no arrests had been made, nor any suspects identified. Number 6. Sheena Brandenburg. Michigan state troopers responded to the scene of what was believed to be a single vehicle crash in Crawford County during the early hours of August 1st of 2020. Upon arrival, police found 56-year-old Troy Lambert in critical condition. He was transported to Munson Hospital in Traverse City, where he eventually succumbed to his injuries. The victim crashed while riding his motorcycle. However, further analysis of the crime scene led investigators to determine that it hadn't been a single vehicle accident as initially believed. After Lambert departed from a local tavern earlier that night, he was struck from behind by a car, causing him to lose control of his bike and crash. Authorities were ultimately able to identify the motorist as 37-year-old Sheena Brandenburg from the city of Gaylord. The woman, a professional mixed martial artist fighter, had already left the state by the time she was identified by law enforcement. She was tracked to the city of Ellsbury, Missouri, where local police officers apprehended her. Brandenburg was subsequently extradited back to Michigan, where she faced charges of reckless driving causing death and failure to stop at the scene of an accident resulted in serious impairment or death. Her bond was set at $250,000. At the time, Brandenburg already had a documented criminal history, having been arrested for driving under the influence in 2010, 2012, and 2016. During the summer of 2021, she was found guilty at trial and sentenced to between 5 and 15 years behind bars for Lambert's death. Number 5. Ada Sim. A former female bodyguard from Hong Kong orchestrated a cold-blooded ambush attack on several of her relatives on June 26th of 2018. 47-year-old Ada Sim, who was unemployed at the time of the incident, turned on her family following the death of her mother 3 years prior. According to court documents, Sim blamed her aunts and uncles for failing to take care of her mother before she succumbed to pneumonia in 2015. They'd reportedly sent her to an assisted living facility where she spent her final days. Sim also accused the family of trying to steal her mother's portion of the inheritance left behind by her grandmother. The day before the attack, Sim, who was critically depressed, allegedly smoked crystal meth. Then on June 26th, she invited her aunts, uncles, and older brother to lunch at the Grace's restaurant near Quarry Bay Park. After the meal, Sim produced a firearm and fired multiple shots at her relatives. One of her aunts, 80-year-old Jim Su Fan, and one of her uncles, Chim Chung Ki, aged 62, were killed in the onslaught. Another one of Sim's aunts, as well as an uncle, was seriously wounded but fortunately survived. Meanwhile, Sim's brother managed to escape the scene unscathed. Following the shooting, the woman was detained by a security guard at City Plaza 4 in Tai-Koo Shing before being turned over to the police. Sim was completely remorseless in the aftermath of the attack. During her eventual trial in 2021, a defense team argued that she should be found guilty of manslaughter because of her mental impairment. However, after 10 days of court proceedings, she was convicted of murder and sentenced to life in prison. After her punishment was announced, Sim stood up and stated, "I'm happy that I have avenged my mother." She also taunted the judge as she was leaving the courtroom, telling her, "You should die." Sim made headlines again in November when she tried to bribe the principal officer in charge of her prison ward, whom she offered $300,000. The officer declined and reported Sim to the proper authorities. As a consequence, the woman was sentenced to an additional 6 months. Number 4. Liv Morgan. On December the 14th of 2023, a sheriff's deputy in Sumter County, Florida, noticed a Jeep swerving in and out of the painted lines of the roadway. Upon pulling the vehicle over, the deputy reportedly detected the smell of marijuana. He also discovered a small plastic bag containing cannabis and a vape pen carrying an oil-like substance. The woman behind the wheel was identified as professional wrestler and former SmackDown Women's Champion Liv Morgan. The 29-year-old WWE star was arrested for possession of marijuana, not more than 20 grams, and drugs, possibly synthetic cannabinoids. She was bonded out of the Sumter County Jail after posting $3,000. In January of 2024, it was reported that Morgan had her felony count of possession of a synthetic cannabinoid dropped. She told investigators that while the bag of marijuana was hers, the vape pen containing the synthetic substance wasn't. Prosecutors agreed to drop the felony charge, but the wrestler's misdemeanor count of marijuana possession remained. Morgan was due back in court on February the 20th. Number 3. Marina Davis. During the summer of 2020, Michigan state troopers were dispatched to the parking lot of a restaurant in Grayling after receiving reports of a domestic dispute. They came upon a woman, 31-year-old Marina Davis, arguing with her boyfriend about whether or not she should get behind the wheel, as she'd reportedly been drinking. Troopers smelled alcohol on the woman's breath, so they asked her to perform sobriety tests. During the evaluation, Davis suddenly charged towards her boyfriend, who was sitting in a nearby vehicle. She rained blows down upon the man in clear view of the officers, who intervened and placed her in the back of a cruiser. Once there, Davis started kicking the inside of the car, breaking various items in the process. She subsequently tried shoving a trooper out of the doorway in order to attack her boyfriend again, but was restrained. Davis was then transported to Crawford County Jail. She was booked on 1 count of domestic violence and 1 count of obstructing and resisting police. Number 2. Vivian Oof. In October of 2020, police were called to the home of Brazilian-born professional boxer Vivian Oof in Interlaken, Switzerland. According to subsequent reports, the woman's 61-year-old husband, Thomas, whose full identity was protected under Swiss law, was clubbed to death with a baseball bat. The incident occurred only 6 days prior to Obenhoff's 34th birthday. The former boxer was arrested on suspicion of committing the brutal murder. She firmly denied the accusations upon being taken into custody and throughout the case's legal proceedings, which came to a head more than 2 years later. During the trial, prosecutors highlighted Obenhoff's checkered past in support of their case against her. After retiring from pro boxing in 2019, she relocated to Switzerland. She got married the following January, after which she started working in the food and beverage industry along with Thomas, a restaurateur. Prior to the latter's death, Obenhoff had been arrested for an unrelated domestic incident. She was also arrested for punching a man during her 30th birthday celebration at a London nightclub back in 2016. One of Obenhoff's ex-boyfriends came forward with stories of his own to further illustrate the woman's violent streak. According to the unnamed man, who was a weightlifter at the time of his relationship with Obenhoff, she attacked him during a drunken argument between the two. Although there were efforts to have her prosecuted for assault, the case was dropped shortly after the passing of her mother. In the end, the former fighter was found guilty of Thomas's killing and sentenced to 16 years in prison as punishment. Stick around after number 1 if you'd like to watch our episode about when Breaking Bad goes wrong as well still. Number 1. Christina Leon. During the early morning hours of September the 11th of 2022, a disturbance in the emergency room of Honor Health Scottsdale Osborne Medical Center in Arizona led to the arrest of an off-duty firefighter. 33-year-old Christina Leon, a member of the Phoenix Fire Department, was visiting a patient in the ER at about 1:30 a.m. She was asked to leave for being unruly and causing some sort of unspecified disturbance. Leon refused to comply, eventually drawing the attention of an off-duty Scottsdale police officer who was working security at the hospital. The officer approached the woman and issued multiple verbal warnings to vacate the premises, all of which were ignored. As Leon continued to make a scene, the officer tried to physically apprehend her, at which point she punched him in the face. Following a brief tussle, Leon was subdued and handcuffed. She was subsequently taken to the Maricopa County Jail, where she continued her disorderly behavior. She refused to identify herself to law enforcement, then kicked a detention officer in the leg multiple times according to court records. Leon was booked on 1 count of aggravated assault on an officer, 1 count of aggravated assault on a detention officer, criminal damage, and 3rd-degree criminal trespassing. Following Leon's arrest, the Phoenix Fire Department announced that they'd be conducting their own internal investigation into her actions. After serving less than half of a 53-month prison sentence for burglary, Florida man Justin Giambanco was granted early release in October of 2022. The 31-year-old, described as a career criminal, quickly resumed the patterns of behavior that led to him racking up over 20 felonies and misdemeanors on his criminal record before his 30th birthday. On April the 20th of 2023, the police in Palm Bay responded to a home on the 2700 block of Palm Drive Northeast, where they found a 69-year-old man dead. The victim's son had come upon his body, strewn over a TV that had been thrown face down on the floor. His hands had been tied and bound with a USB cable, and he'd suffered a large laceration to the neck. Investigators found a blood-covered kitchen knife next to his body. Giambanco was linked to the violent crime after officers found a cell phone underneath the victim's body that reportedly belonged to the repeat offender. As Palm Bay authorities subsequently made efforts to locate Giambanco, they learned that he was already in the custody of Melbourne police in connection with an unrelated burglary. Upon searching the suspect's vehicle, law enforcement found a handgun of the same caliber as ammunition found at the Palm Drive crime scene, suggesting he and the victim had struggled over the firearm. There were also a pair of bloody sneakers which investigators believe were worn by Giambanco during the deadly home invasion. His resulting murder charge was added to the lengthy list of offenses he'd committed in the months following his early release from prison. On April the 15th, the woman he'd been staying with had kicked him out of the house, but he refused to leave. When the police got involved, Giambanco maintained his defiance, leading to an altercation with a Brevard County deputy. He was also implicated in several nearby burglaries. Giambanco faced a litany of new charges, including trespassing, battering a police officer, second-degree murder with a firearm, false imprisonment, grand theft with a firearm, and possession of a firearm by a convicted felon. The Palm Bay police chief described the man as pure evil and also contended that his latest string of violent crimes wouldn't have transpired if he'd been required to serve out his entire prison sentence. Number 6. Michael Pent. A man known on the streets of Marion County, Florida as Zipperface, due to his distinctive facial tattoos, was arrested for assaulting his girlfriend in February of 2021. Sheriff's deputies had been dispatched to the Stage Top Motel, where they encountered the suspect, 21-year-old Michael Pent, as well as his partner of 2 months. The woman told law enforcement that she and Pent had been in the motel lobby when he asked to use her phone. She said they needed to go back to the room to charge the device first, at which point Pent flew into an unhinged rage. He began screaming and pushed his girlfriend, who subsequently fled into the parking lot. Pent pursued, then started shoving her around and striking her. The man admitted his misdeeds to law enforcement and was arrested on charges of battery and violation of probation. It was the latest in a long string of arrests for Pent, who'd last faced legal troubles in connection with a vehicle theft at the Microtel Inn and Suites in Ocala a few months earlier. He and an accomplice identified as 22-year-old Zachary Allen Hamel drove the stolen car to Ocklawaha and parked it behind a residence in the 13,000 block of Highway 25. When the owner of the home saw the vehicle, he found it suspicious and contacted the police. After searching the property, officers found Hamel using the bathroom while Pent hid in the shower. They both faced grand theft auto charges following their subsequent arrest. Number 5. Lee Hazen Williamson. In September of 2012, A serial cross-dresser from California was arrested for baring his genitals to strangers, only a year after a similarly revealing incident on a county bus. Lee Hazen Williamson was the flasher identified in subsequent reports. The Austrian-born 57-year-old, whose occupation was listed as caregiver, was caught exposing himself while donning a floral top and bathing suit. The incident occurred at the dock of the Lakefront Chalet Motel in Lake County and was reported to the authorities by an eyewitness. Williamson was brought to the Lake County Jail and booked on a $50,000 bond. In May of the previous year, the man had allegedly boarded a county bus with a dress and wig on, then proceeded to expose himself to fellow passengers. He was ultimately convicted of indecent exposure in connection with the bus incident and was later detained again for failing to register as an offender. Number 4. Jennifer Carvajal. Early on April the 25th of 2021, a Florida Highway Patrol trooper clocked a Hyundai Elantra blazing down Interstate 4 in Tampa at speeds of up to 111 miles per hour. The officer, Sergeant Jason Moore, made a swift U-turn and gave chase with sirens blaring, eventually catching up to the speeding car near the exit to Mango Road. As he tried to overtake the vehicle, the young woman behind the wheel made a sudden, sharp right onto the road shoulder, sending the Elantra down a slope, then up an embankment. The vehicle subsequently struck a concrete light pole as well as a palm tree before overturning in the parking lot of a nearby car dealership. The accident sent 2 passengers hurtling from the Elantra's back seat, one of whom later died at the hospital. The only one of the car's 4 total occupants who'd been wearing a seat belt at the time of the crash was the driver, 24-year-old Jennifer Carvajal. She suffered only minor injuries, but at the hospital, officers noted her eyes were glassy, her words were slurred, and she had trouble staying awake. Medical tests confirmed that she was intoxicated with a blood alcohol level above the legal driving limit. Carvajal was arrested and charged with reckless driving involving a serious injury, DUI involving a serious injury, DUI manslaughter, driving without a license, and multiple counts of DUI property damage. After news of the deadly crash hit the airwaves, it emerged that Carvajal already had another DUI manslaughter conviction on her criminal record. A few weeks prior to her 17th birthday, in February of 2014, she'd driven her Lincoln Navigator straight through a red light before colliding with another vehicle, sending it careening into a pedestrian crossing sign. The other driver, 52-year-old Keith Allen Davis, lay bleeding and unconscious as Carvajal stumbled out of her wrecked Navigator and told a bystander, "I just got my learner's permit. I don't have insurance." Davis was eventually taken to Lakeland Regional Medical Center where he was pronounced dead. In Carvajal's vehicle, police found multiple empty cans of alcoholic drinks as well as an empty bottle of tequila. A few hours after the crash, her blood alcohol level tested above the legal limit. In the incident's wake, Carvajal pleaded no contest in adult court and was given a 5-year prison sentence to be followed by 5 years of probation. She was also ordered to enroll in a residential treatment program. In connection with her second DUI, Carvajal contended that she hadn't in fact been the one driving, even though one of the other passengers identified her as such to Sergeant Moore at the scene. If convicted of her most recent charges, she could face a prison sentence of up to 40 years. Number 3. Cole Johnson. The police in Independence, Iowa, were called to the scene of a domestic dispute in the 800 block of 6th Avenue Southwest on April the 29th of 2023. Responding officers were told by neighbors that a woman had been going from house to house, knocking on front doors and asking residents for help. Law enforcement eventually tracked her down and discovered that she'd suffered apparent stab wounds, for which a neighbor had fixed a makeshift tourniquet to stem the bleeding. She was subsequently taken to a nearby hospital for treatment, but her injuries were reportedly deemed non-life-threatening. At the victim's residence, law enforcement came upon 29-year-old Cole Johnson, who was accused of inflicting the woman's injuries during a fight in the backyard. He was arrested on charges of willful injury causing bodily injury, first-degree harassment, and 3 counts of child endangerment. Johnson subsequently bonded out of jail, but found himself back in trouble with the law within a couple of weeks. On May the 10th of 2023, Independence police were called to the 300 block of 4th Street Southeast for a report of a family disturbance. Upon arrival, they encountered an uncooperative male suspect who was identified as Johnson. He threatened the officers with a knife and ultimately needed to be tased in order to be subdued and taken back into custody. The man consequently faced additional charges of assault against a peace officer with a dangerous weapon, domestic abuse assault, and interference with official acts. Number 2. Andres Quintana Martinez. Officers from the Anderson Police Department in California were called to a local business on February 9th of 2023 after receiving reports of a man rolling around on the floor and shouting incoherently. The individual was identified as 40-year-old Andres Quintana Martinez, a habitual criminal offender who was already well known to Anderson law enforcement. In subsequent reports, it was detailed how Martinez had been arrested 20 times within the span of half a year for various crimes, including violent and drug-related offenses. For his latest documented incident, the man was charged with public intoxication, but in the preceding 6 months, he'd also faced charges of resisting a peace officer, prowling, and felony obstruction of a peace officer, among others. Despite his lengthy rap sheet, Martinez was released from the Shasta County Jail the day after his most recent arrest. Anderson police subsequently released a statement addressing the concerns of local residents about repeat criminals such as Martinez being allowed back on the streets. They revealed that the Shasta County Jail had been forced to close an entire floor due to severe staff shortages, which led to a number of chronic offenders being released from custody. Number 1. Tyrone Howard. The NYPD received reports of shots fired near a public housing development in East Harlem on the night of October the 21st of 2015. Officer Randolph Holder and his partner arrived at the scene at around 8:30 p.m., whereupon they spoke with a man who said that his bicycle had been stolen at gunpoint. The victim revealed that following the theft, the suspect had fled with a group of people along a footpath near the East River. An individual with a bike was subsequently located on a pedestrian overpass near the highway. When officers engaged the male suspect, he pulled out a firearm and started shooting. 33-year-old Holder was struck in the head with a bullet during the ensuing gunfight, after which the thief abandoned the bike and fled on foot. Having been shot in the leg, the suspect only made it a few blocks before he was caught and taken into police custody. Following a brief stint at the hospital, the man, identified as 30-year-old Tyrone Howard, was booked on murder, robbery, and weapons charges. Howard had reportedly been arrested a total of 28 times since he was 13, including for drug possession and robbery, and consequently had 2 previous stints in state prison. For Officer Holder's slaying, the career criminal, known on the streets as Peanut, was found guilty on all counts by a Manhattan jury. In April of 2017, he was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Number 8. Dana Johnson and Kiana Wilson. On December the 19th of 2018, Michigan women Dana Johnson and Kiana Wilson, aged 18 and 40 respectively, were stopped by loss prevention officers at a Target in Bloomfield Township. The duo had tried to walk away with a shopping cart containing roughly $1,900 in unpaid electronics, even though the store was filled with police officers at the time. The Bloomfield Township Police Department, along with Sylvan Lake, Kego Harbor, and Orchard Lake Police Departments, hosted a Shop with a Cop event. Over a dozen members of law enforcement were at the scene, helping underprivileged children choose gifts for their families. Johnson and Wilson had tried to pull the ill-fated theft only feet away from them. Predictably, security personnel asked for police support and the 2 women were arrested on felony retail fraud charges. The Kego Harbor Police Department posted about the incident on its Facebook, adding a tongue-in-cheek comment that a special episode of Dumb Criminal Minds was likely being filmed live in the store. Thanks for watching. Would you rather fight the best female UFC fighter or get hit in the face by a foul ball at a baseball game? Let us know in the comments section below.